I'm Charlie and I work out at the Royal Botanic Gardens of Victoria as a coordinator of horticulture in the Australian garden. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to select and how to plant a eucalypt in your home garden so that we can just give that tree the best chance of success. So I'm starting from a point of sort of presuming that you've done a bit of background research, you know where you're going to plant the eucalypt, you know what the growing conditions are, you know a bit about where your eucalypt naturally occurs, so you can really match those two things together really well. And you're at the point where you can head off to the nursery. So how do you choose a really good quality plant and what are some key things to look for? So the first thing to look for is look at the plant, and it seems like stating the obvious, but does it look like a healthy plant? Does it have a good amount of foliage on it from top to bottom? Is there a well-structured spacing of the branches around the tree and down to the bottom? And I'm going to just compare these two together so you can see. You can see that there's not really any branching on the lower, probably the lower half of the trunk. All of that starts at the top, and what that means is that there's very little nutrient going into the base of the trunk here, and it also means that it's pretty top heavy, so quite unstable. You can see that the trunk is about the same thickness at the base as it is at the top, so it doesn't really have any what we call taper. So taper is where you want it thinner at the top and fatter at the bottom, and that really helps to give the tree stability. Makes for a much stronger tree. So I just want to compare this one with one of these other ones that I've got over here. So you can see that looking at these two, there's a couple of things that are really obvious. This one is managing to hold itself upright even though the wind is blowing fairly strongly. And you can look, if you look down at the bottom here, you can see that the trunk is fairly thick compared to what it is when you get up here. So it's got some quite good taper, making for a strong tree. It's also got that branching that's starting from all the way around and branching at the base and all the way relatively evenly spaced around there. Again, quite a good form, quite a good structure. So that's something quite important to look for. This one over here has got stakes in it, but the stakes have been really well applied. And the reason I say that is because they still allow the tree to move and flex in the wind. So it's building up that taper. And you can also see on this tree that it's quite a bit thicker at the bottom than it is at the top. It's also got a nice distribution of branches and foliage all the way around. So it's not skinny, top-heavy, unstable kind of plant. The only other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the top part of the tree, the green part of the tree, is the structure. So looking at the difference between these two trees, on first impressions, this is a pretty healthy, well-growing tree. It's got good distribution of foliage all the way around. But when we start to look at the form of the tree, if you want to grow it as a specimen tree to sort of grow, upright and strong over many years to come, ideally you're looking for something that has a strong central leader. And that's what this is here. It means that there's one element that is the trunk, and off that trunk comes the branches, and they are different sizes and have a different growth pattern, and they behave in different ways. When you compare that to something that's happening in here, you can see here that there's a bit of forking happening here, and you'll look at each one of these two stems and they're about the same size. So basically what that means is that both of these are trying to be the trunk. There's not one trunk and a branch, they're both trying to be the trunk, and they're going to compete with each other. And what that happens is they will grow at roughly the same rate, and the bit of bark that gets included in that crack will slowly become a wedge. It means that quite likely over time one of these will split. They'll just kind of force each other apart and you'll end up with a pretty damaged tree and not something that we're looking for. As an aside, there is probably an exception to that. There's a group of eucalypts that are called mallees, and they regenerate from a lignotube, or a storage facility, I guess, growth at the base. And it is possible to sort of grow them up as a multi-stem tree and then periodically every few years cut them down to just above the lignotuber and have them regenerate. So you can just have that regenerating new foliage. So that's a little bit about the basic form and structure and stability of the plant. Now we're going to start looking at really what is probably the most important, for me, the most important part of the tree, and that's the root system. So some of the things to look at, first of all, with regard to, can you see any potential flaws in the root system, is how is the tree behaving above the ground. So you can see that this one is supporting itself in the wind, likely to indicate a pretty good root system at the base there. Nice and strong. This one, as I mentioned before, has got some stakes on there, but it is still, when I give it a bit of a wiggle at the top, I can see that tree is bending in the stem before it's starting to wobble at the base. Now if I'm getting, as an example, this one, I pick it up and it's got this stake right up against the trunk, so the trunk's not able to move and it's not able to develop any strength. But if I just give that a wobble, you can see that actually the tree is not bending much at all, but the soil all around here is starting to heave and bulge. Now that's very often an indicator that there's some root defects in there and something that we'd want to look a bit more closely at. Another thing you can do is to just put your hand over the top and have a look at the base of the pot and see if there are any roots protruding through these little gaps at the base there. And if there are, and there's a lot of them, that can be an indicator that the tree has been in the pot for a little bit too long. So likely to be developing potentially some girdling roots or some kinking roots in there as well. Again, not things that we want to see because they mean that the roots are wrapping round and round and round. They're weak, they're not radiating out into the ground and forming a strong anchorage point for that tree.